Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, January 15th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Donald Trump's disapproval rating and the fact that it's at its highest point throughout, his entire presidency. On top of that, his approval rating is at the lowest point since December of 2017. So the last time it was this low was quite literally over 3 years ago, and I find it very unfortunate for the president and the president's party that his approval rating is taking such a significant hit as a result of the failed insurrection at the Capitol that occurred around 9 days ago. And that's something that is going to be a stain on the Trump presidency. It's the final thing that many Americans will remember about the presidency under Donald Trump, which is something that is probably going to hurt Republicans moving ahead into the future. But looking at his disapproval rating, the only time it was really comparable was around this time period. This is December 2017. And despite his approval rating being at the lowest point throughout his entire presidency, up till now, it's about matched now, but his disapproval rating has since been overcame by the new numbers in 2021. His disapproval rating is at the highest point throughout his entire presidency when he just has a few days left to go. Donald Trump has 5 days left to go, and 58% of Americans disapprove of Donald Trump on average. If we actually break it down by the true public, not just likely or registered voters, well, it expands even higher. President Trump nears a 60% disapproval rating, and his approval rating dips down to 36.7%. So President Trump has gone from a point where, right before the insurrection at the Capitol, President Trump had a 41% approval rating amongst adults. It was higher amongst the general populace, amongst voters and adults, 43%. And then after that occurred, it took an immediate dip. You can see the very big decrease in support amongst the American people. As a result, it seems as if, that those 3 years of climbing from that super low point in 2017 was completely lost as a result of what occurred at the Capitol. And I think that largely was just a buildup. It was just, that final thing that pushed a number of independents and Republicans over the top to a point where they said, maybe President Trump isn't exactly the best person for the Republican Party. Maybe President Trump shouldn't be the 2024 nominee. Maybe he shouldn't be leading the Republican Party after just losing an election. And what was a very contentious election, an election that was, compared to really no other. Joe Biden ended up winning, but he didn't win by a super large amount, and that largely had to do with the fact that Donald Trump was actually approved of by a much higher percentage on Election Day. This is the day after the election, and you can assume that this would actually, if you just go a day before, it doesn't really matter. They don't have a November 3rd number, so I'm just going to go with November 4th. And it gives Donald Trump a 44.5% approval rating. I think this is something that many Democrats expected to actually be the final nail in his coffin. This approval rating wasn't high. When President Obama was reelected in 2012, he didn't have a high approval rating either, but it was higher than President Trump's was back in November 2020. But 45% wasn't something to brag about. There were still 53% of the American people that disapproved of President Trump as a president. Now, it has since dropped from 45% all the way down to 38%. That's a decrease of 7 points. 7% from November 2020 to January 2021. President Trump is not experiencing the lame duck surge in approval rating that we have seen happen for some presidents. It doesn't always happen, but it generally does. We can actually take a look at the time period, comparing him to previous presidents. Now, the problem with comparing President Trump directly with other presidents is because he is only going to serve a 4-year term. Both, all three of them, Barack Obama, George Bush, and Bill Clinton, all served 8-year terms. So by the end of their 8 years, they actually experienced a bump in terms of approval. But if we're looking at where President Trump, he is higher, much higher than where George W. Bush was when he left office. George W. Bush was around this point. If we can actually get there, I don't know if we'll be able to. It's a little bit higher than 27%. But President Trump, after, what we saw for everything that occurred, we expected his approval rating to possibly jump up. I mean, it jumped up for Obama. Obama left office with a very, very, very high approval rating. We can actually take a look here. It was a little bit higher than this, 54, 55, 56%, while Bill Clinton left with a high 60s approval rating. George H.W. Bush left, during that lame duck period with a 54.7% approval rating, despite being wildly disapproved of during the general election season. Ronald Reagan left with a bump, during that lame duck session, going from being disapproved of by the American people to a mid-60s in terms of the approval rating. Jimmy Carter didn't get that bump. That was unfortunate for him. Gerald Ford did get that bump. So what we saw, in terms of modern political history, was that Donald Trump doesn't necessarily compare to a number of other previous presidents in terms of post losing an election or, becoming the outgoing president for the case of George W. Bush, the case of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, and Ronald Reagan, because they were two-term presidents. They all were able to leave around, 8 years after they were elected, which means that they received a bump near the end of their 8 years. But if we're just comparing the 4 years, it wasn't just that President Trump isn't getting this approval bump. He consistently underperformed every single president throughout the entire first term of the Trump presidency. The only term of the Trump presidency, Donald Trump only surpassed President Obama once. For every single other day of the Trump presidency, every single other day, out of 1,457, based off the 538 tracker, 1,457 so far, only one day did Donald Trump have a better approval rating than Barack Obama. I believe he had a better approval rating than George Bush right around this moment. Actually, maybe not in the first term. It might not have even happened. Bill Clinton, I think it happened right around here for a very narrow period of time. It seems around December 2017 for President Trump, comparable to December 1993 for former President Clinton. But if you're looking at President Trump, he consistently underperformed all his predecessors in terms of approval, not once being approved of since January 2017. I mean, the last time it was tied, where it was this close, was in February 2nd, 2017. So looking at the January 2017 approval rating numbers, that was the only time period where President Trump was approved of, and then it tied, and then from then on, it went to a constant level of disapproval from the American people, a very constant level of disapproval. And as we reached, today, it had never hit such a high point for the disapproval rating in the entire Trump presidency. Not once. Even when 20% more Americans disapproved of him than approved of him. That's exactly what we're seeing happen now, except the disapproval rating is higher, which means that the American people are taking a more harsh stance against President Trump than previously. This is something that is going to stain the Trump presidency. He could have been disapproved of by such a large margin all the way back in 2017. No one really would have cared now, because that was 3 years ago. Nobody would have told me that after the election, President Trump's approval rating would dip down this low to 38.1%. This comes as a result of the ABC News Washington Post poll, which is 38%, 39% adjusted. YouGov, 39% approved, 40% adjusted. Pew Research, 29%, 31% adjusted. And Ipsos, or I don't know how to pronounce it, 34% for approved, 35% adjusted. Rasmussen Reports, the only one that actually shows President Trump with a pretty high approval rating, actually is adjusted downwards, because it is so significantly off, a bunch of times. It isn't exactly the most credible pollster, but it is the one that President Trump loves the most, and even them, they can't even put Donald Trump in the approve. And even with those adjusted numbers, it's disapproved of by negative 11 points. So no matter which way you look at it, President Trump is being disapproved of. Whether you choose his favorite pollster or his least favorite pollster or regular pollsters, all of them have the regular conclusion that President Trump is disapproved of, and after the adjusted margin, all of them say he's disapproved of by double digits. And now that it's down to 38.1%, this actually tells me that if Donald Trump continues to serve as the face of the GOP, which 92% of Trump supporters wish, 41% of traditional Republicans, these are Romney, McCain-esque type Republicans, this is what 41% of traditional Republicans want. 41% of traditional Republicans, on top of 92% of Trump supporter Republicans, want President Trump to remain the face of the GOP, to be the 2024 Republican presidential candidate. Well, Based off that alone, I would say that's something that is going to be very good for Donald Trump, but very bad for the Republican Party, because they are not going to win in 2024 by running the same candidate who lost in 2020. On top of that, if you're looking at the amount of independents who believe that President Trump should be removed, it's 52%. An additional 20% believe that Trump should be the 2024 Republican candidate, and 26% of independents believe that Trump's contesting of the election results is fair. He should be doing it. So around 1 in 4 independents say, I'm okay with the Trump legal team, trying to overturn the election results. And then, not an additional, same number, same group, 1 in 5. I'm assuming, that's 80% of those who support President Trump's contesting of the election results. But 1 in 5 political independents agree that President Trump should be the 2024 nominee. So if you're looking at that, he's not exactly winning over a number of those independent voters. And while Republicans may want him to be the nominee in 2024, this is the way Republicans and Democrats and independents will all remember President Trump. Who cares about what happened in 2017? Who cares about what happened in 2018 or 2019? President Trump's impeachment probably will be, overshadowing so many other things. The fact that it happened back in 2019 and, more major things have happened under the Trump presidency, that overshadowed the previous impeachment. But this one, right in the final few days of his presidency, on top of an approval rating that is abysmal, he might end up with one of the lowest approval ratings for a president leaving office. That is not a good record. President Trump has had every possible chance to go back on what he said about the election being rigged, winning over more support from people. Had he immediately contested the election results and just stayed quiet, I can guarantee you his approval rating probably would have reached somewhere near the positive. I don't think it would have hit the positive, but I think it could be reminiscent of what happened back in early 2020 when COVID-19 first hit. That was President Trump's highest approval rating since January 2017. 46% of Americans approved of him. Only 50% disapproved of him. That was a difference of 4%. Trump would have won in a landslide with those numbers. I'm telling you that. 49.9 to 45.8. But now, you have to add an additional 8% of voters that disapprove of him and subtract an additional 8% of voters who approve of him. So that's a very big difference. That goes from a 4-point margin to a 20-point margin. 4 to 20 in just under a year. Because of what happened in the Capitol, how it was largely associated with President Trump and his surrogates. And now if Republicans want him to be the face of the GOP, he very well could. We all know he's not above it. We all know President Trump would love to hold rallies again. Even if he wasn't president, he would love speaking directly to his supporters. 92% of Trump supporters believe he should be the 2024 Republican candidate again. Believe it or not, Trump supporters are the majority of the Republican Party. If the majority of the Republican Party wants Trump to be the nominee again, well, they're going to choose him. 2024 preliminary Republican polling data has showed us that Donald Trump has consistently scored the highest out of any potential candidate, by a lot. The next candidates come up with 11, 12%, while he's at 40, 50, sometimes 60% in terms of support. So President Trump will start out as the front runner in 2024. And I have no doubt in my mind that if these numbers actually get to him and he finds out about them, and while he may not have social media access like he used to, he still could get a very large audience, a very large media presence if he decides to hold rallies, if he decides to make boisterous claims the same way he did in the past. Because what Trump did in 2016 worked. It may not have worked in 2020, but he still almost won. He was 1 point away from winning the same way Hillary Clinton was 1 point away from winning in 2016. Was Romney 1 point away from winning in 2012? No. Was he 1 point away from winning in 2008? No. Was Kerry 1 point away from winning in 2004? Technically, no. The last time that was this close would have been 2000, except for whenever Donald Trump is on the ballot. So even in 2020, when his approval rating didn't seem too high, it was actually around 45%, he came close to winning the presidency. He came very close to winning the presidency. You can only imagine what the numbers would have been when it was just a 4-point difference. But now it's no longer a difference of around, look at this. This is an 8-point difference between those who approve of him and disapprove of him. Now it's 20. It has done more than doubled the margin between the amount of people who approve and disapprove of him. And the fact that his disapproval rating has hit the highest point in his entire presidency is a very telling sign for Donald Trump's ability to lead the nation in the future if he does end up, becoming a top nominee, he's not going to be someone that people remember as the president who was liked, or the president who was able to recover and serve as this presidential figure that many people said, once he's the nominee, once he's the winner of the election, he will start being presidential. He will start, stop saying all of these things on social media, pushing these baseless claims. And they were wrong. He ended up doing it regardless. And now he's paying the price for it. The American people are telling President Trump that they don't care that he's on his way out. They still do not like him. And the majority of Americans want President Trump to be removed from office. The majority of Americans want him to be removed, no matter how close it is to the few days that he's out. Because that will send a message to President Trump. There's the possibility that they prevent him from running again. And if the GOP has their own personal interests at heart, I do think that they should back preventing President Trump from running again. Because this is how America will remember him. Not for anything else that occurred, but for a terrorist attack on the Capitol. A failed insurrection. Not accepting the election results. That is Donald Trump's legacy moving forward. That is what he will be remembered for. And 58% of Americans already disapprove of him, despite him leaving office, having no real power in just a few days. And they still say they don't like Donald Trump. And if he runs in 2024, they're going to vote the same way they did in 2020, except some of those Trump supporters will move over political sides just because they no longer approve of him. There is going to be a decrease in vote share if you were approved of by 45% of the public, and it has gone down to 38%. If just 52.6% of the public disapproved of you, and now 58% disapprove, you are going to lose at least a few voters. And Donald Trump can't afford to lose any. I mean, he lost. He would need to gain voters. And if he's leaving, and this is his legacy, well, so be it. And the Republican Party is going to pay the price for it if they choose to nominate him in 2024. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post 2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.